So have you ever heard the terms like return track or aux track or effects channel, and you thought to yourself, why do I need this? Like, how is this going to help me make my music better? Well, my friend, that is why I'm here today to show you everything you need to know about return tracks. Now, just to be very clear up front, return tracks are sometimes called just that, return tracks. Sometimes they're called aux tracks. I think in Ableton, they're called aux tracks. In Studio One, like I'm using, they're called effects channels. So you might get some slightly different terminology depending on the DAW, but every single DAW has this ability. Now, what is an effects channel? Well, if I come over to my mix window, let me delete the one that I have. That way we can just create it so you can see the way this works. So if I right click, as you can see here, I can add an effects channel, or which is just another word for return track, like we just talked about. Now, what is this effects channel for? What is a return track? Well, one way of conceptualizing this is think of a guitarist. Most electric guitarists have a pedal board, right? They've got multiple pedals that they can turn on and off. They've got delay pedals, reverb, saturation, distortion, all those things, right? Now, let me ask you this question. Do those pedals have sound in of themselves? Are they able to create sound in of themselves? Or are those pedals dependent on the sound of the guitar going through the pedals? The correct answer is obviously the latter. So the pedals for a guitarist are the middleman between the guitarist and the amp. It's a very similar thing. An effects channel has effects on it, like a delay or a reverb, right? But there's no audio on the track. Instead, it acts as a middleman between your audio tracks right here and the main output. Does that make sense? So now let me show you what this looks like. So I'm going to put a reverb on this return track. Now it's very important on any plugin that you put on a return track, mix at 100% wet. Don't ever go 50% dry. That doesn't help you at all. And I'll explain in a second why that is. But for now, just follow that rule always and forever. Now that we've got a reverb set up here on this return track, let's label it that. Again, think of it as a guitar pedal. So this is our track. So this is the vocal, like the scratch vocal take that we were messing around with in Module 2 when we were talking about recording into the DAW.
What have I become? Where did I go wrong? 'Cause I thought I'd never.
Now look what happens if we go to your sends and you send it to the reverb that we just set up on this return track.
What have I become? Where did I go wrong? 'Cause I thought I'd never.
And then if we turn it off,
What I had with you was everything to lose.
now you might be asking, okay, that's great, but why the heck wouldn't you just put the reverb directly on the track like this and then adjust the dry wet knob? It gives it the exact same sound, right?
Now my chest is hollow and my pride.
You're right, it does give it the exact same sound. But there are multiple advantages to using return tracks, especially on plugins like reverbs and delays, instead of putting them on as direct inserts. One of the reasons is simply to conserve CPU space on your computer. And again, this is especially true for reverbs and delays. Those plugins tend to eat up CPU a bit more than, say, an EQ or a compression would. Because often, if you're in the same session working on the same song, you'll want the same reverb on multiple tracks. So in this instance, just to keep things very simple, I just have the instrumental version of this song, right? And then I have this scratch vocal that we recorded back in Module 2. But I can send both of these to that reverb, but we're still only using one reverb, right? The CPU, as far as the CPU we're consuming, it's only one reverb, versus if we had 10 of these tracks and we had to put little plate on every single one of them direct as an insert, that would massively eat up the CPU. Now, that's not the only thing an effects channel does for you. Another thing it does is it allows you to customize, especially your reverb and delay sounds. Because this now is the middleman. This is like a pedal, right? But I can put more things on here than just the reverb. So let's put like a flanger on here and say we wanted that sort of flangey, chorusy sound on this reverb. That would sound like this.
I've become? Where did I go wrong?
And then I could put like an EQ to filter off the top end. That way it's very warm.
'Cause I thought I'd never break us. What I had with you.
And then if I wanted to, I could use a compressor to sidechain this to the lead vocal. That way it ducks the lead vocal out of the way. That's another way that you could use this.
Was everything to lose? Now my chest is hollow and my pride is swallowed.
Now, if you're confused about the sidechain compressor here, don't worry, I have a bonus video in the compression crash course in Module 4 that will explain everything you need to know about using sidechain compression in this way. But do you see what's happening here? Instead of adding all of these individual plugins to directly on your track, that affects the entirety of the vocal track. Where for the most part, it's usually a better idea to keep the vocals sort of dry, sort of basic. This is the basic vocal sound. And then use, for any sort of more spacey, delay, reverb, even chorusy effects, I prefer to put those on effects channels because it allows you to customize those channels like we did here, where it's not just a reverb plugin, but also a flanger if we so please, or an EQ or a filter, or even a sidechain compressor here. So that's a reverb. Real quick, just one more example. Let's try this on a delay. So I'm gonna pull in my Valhalla delay plugin. And now notice how the default is 50% mix. You wanna make sure if you're on a return track, 100% mix every time. Otherwise, you're gonna get if it's at 50%, it's gonna send it to the delay, as you can hear. But what it's also going to do is turn up the volume of this track because it's sending more of the same. So it's just turning up the volume when you have the mix knob at 50.
'Cause I thought I'd never.
So there's no reason to have more of the dry signal that's already in the lead vocal track to begin with. So mix at 100% every time when it's on a return track. And then as you can see,
What I had with you.
and again, what this allows you to do is customize these channels. So what I often like to do is put a reverb on those delays. So now I can put this reverb on that delay channel.
Everything to lose. Now my chest is hollow and my pride is swallowed.
Let's go with a more
What
interesting.
have I become? Where did I go wrong? 'Cause I thought I'd never break us.
So here's without the reverb.
What I had with you.
But if
Was
I put the
everything
reverb on,
to lose. Now my chest is hollow.
right? So you can use reverbs after the delay. You can use like a phaser after the delay if you want, like a Tame Impala type thing.
Have I become? Where did I go wrong? 'Cause I thought I'd never break us. What I had with you was everything to lose. Now my chest is hollow and my pride is swallowed.
So, my friend, that is everything you need to know about effects channels. It's a very basic concept. Once again, it's very similar to a guitarist and the pedal board. The pedal board are like those return tracks. It's a middleman between the guitar and the amp. It's a middleman between the vocal or your audio tracks and the main output.